All right, guys, let's go ahead and get started. First, let me say thank you to Stefan Hild and the Provident Group for allowing us to speak on this webinar and discuss what the PIP group does and what the Provident Group does, and how working with the Provident Group can be a huge benefit to our investors as well as potential new investors in tax liens and tax deeds. We're going to blow through this pretty quickly, more or less going to give you just a crop dusting, basics of investing in tax liens and tax deeds. We do put on some more in-depth webinars, but we're going to try and just take a shotgun approach tonight, give you the very basics, show you some examples, and if you're interested in more, there's more to come. So we're going to cover a lot of ground. We're going to cover the basics of investing in tax liens, tax deeds, and foreclosure. It sounds like a lot, but we're also going to talk about REO, cash flow, and resale. We're essentially just going to take you through the entire process of investing in a tax lien all the way through the resale of the property. So let's get started. And the slides are loading really slowly, so I'm going to give a pause as we let those load in properly. Okay, so who we are. PIP Group is a group of real estate professionals investing on behalf of individual investors in tax default real estate. That essentially is going to cover the whole sphere of everything from a tax lien to tax deeds to the resale of the REO that eventually comes from the investment in tax liens and tax deeds. So we are essentially a full turnkey service provider. We handle everything for you, essentially making what is normally considered a complex investment, a very passive one for our investors. We provide everything from the due diligence prior to the auctions to the actual acquisitions of the tax liens, through the management, the resale, and then the actual reinvestment of your investment principal and profits into new tax liens or tax default properties. What we don't do, we don't sell expensive coaching programs on this broadcast or actually on any broadcast. We do not do any of that. All of our information is always free. And if you ever have questions that are specific to an area that you're interested in, we'll be happy to help. I've put up here just a few examples of some of the gurus out there that guarantee certain things like earning 8 to 25% government guaranteed. Government guarantees nothing but death and more taxes. And you will receive a free and clear tax deed. This was actually on the homepage of an advertiser's website. We'll discuss it in more detail, but tax deeds are not free and clear by any means. It sounds too good to be true, but it's the law to an extent. That's somewhat accurate in the fact that the government, the state governments, the local governments dictate and write the legislation that therefore drives the policies and procedures of each state's tax sales. Turning $20,000 into $20 million in 1 year, that's never going to happen. And actual tax sale properties. Listen, folks, if they went default, they're probably not going to look like this. So just keep that in mind when you're considering investing in tax liens, that there are going to be needs for repairs. It's not going to be multi-million-dollar mansions. It's going to be good, profitable, middle-of-the-road property, and we'll actually look at some of those examples. So what we do, as I mentioned, we provide free basic educational information on all the opportunities we have. Our clients can earn double-digit returns for our investors. We make complex investing passive, as I mentioned, and most importantly, we place our funds in your. We place your funds in your name. Your investments are never pooled. That's important when we talk about self-direct IRAs because they essentially, and Stephan might correct me on this later, but they are essentially the owners of your investments. Therefore, they can't be pulled. They need to remain in your name. All our investments remain in your name, and they have been since the day we started business. What you have here is an example of something recent. While you guys are on this broadcast, if you get bored listening to me talk too much, or any of us talk too much, you can actually go do some research on this property yourself. This is one we acquired in a sale last month. The opening bid on it was $37,500. We actually took it for $105,000. The repairs at the time that this presentation was put together were $12,500. They're actually coming in under that. The house needs a good cleaning. The roof needs a good cleaning, and paint, a little bit of carpet, very simple repairs. So the total investment per this slide was $117,500, and we'll sell this property somewhere between $170,000 to $178,000. We'll list it around $179,900. So giving you a gross profit, if we took $10,000 off of that, of 43.8%. So this is one acquisition that we just happened to do within the last 30 to 45 days. So very simply, what are tax liens? Tax liens are a very reliable and predictable source of revenue for local government. It's amazing how many people don't know or don't realize that their property taxes are actually what supports all the local schools, fire departments, police departments, anything county related. It comes from your property taxes. So if the property taxes don't get paid, schools get closed, policemen get laid off, that sort of thing. So what tax liens do is it provides a good source of revenue, a credible and known revenue, regardless of what the economic standards may be for that year. They know that investors are going to come in there and more or less pick up the pieces. And in exchange, they offer high returns for that investment. So what we do is we define tax lien investors with the PIP group. We categorize our investors in two categories: redemption investors and property investors. A redemption investor is essentially somebody that wants to invest in a state like Illinois, where the penalties are very high. They can be as high as 36% per year. And as a penalty, that basically means that the day after we buy it, we can buy it for 18%. If it's redeemed the day after we buy it, it actually is going to earn that full percentage the next day, so 18%. So if you bought a lien for $1,000 on Monday and it redeemed on Tuesday, and you bought it at the highest bid rate, you would earn back $180, so $1,180 on your total investment. What also makes Illinois very attractive, and we'll look at it a little more, is that it has a compounding factor in that whatever your bid rate is, it multiplies every 6 months. So 6 months in a day, if you bought it at 18%, it becomes 36%. So if it's redeemed on 6 months in a day, you're earning 360, and it's going to continue to do that all the way up to 108% max. So 3 years from the initial investment. Property investors are what a lot of folks that initially get into tax lien investing are interested in. They want to, I hate the cliche of pennies on the dollar, because you're not going to buy properties for pennies on the dollar. You can make a substantial return, but it's never going to be pennies on the dollar. It's going to be half dollars on the dollar. But property investors get into the investment with the goal in mind that they want to acquire the property eventually, fix it, flip it as is, whatever their exit strategy may be. And that's something we'll actually discuss with you before you invest. So states that would be appealing to this type of investor would be Georgia, which is 20%, and again, that's a penalty. So if we go to the tax sale on the first Tuesday of each month, and that lien was redeemed the following Tuesday, you're earning 20% on your total investment. It has to be paid in full at that time. All right, it seems like my screen's gotten hung up here, but I'll continue to go on as the slide loads itself. So when we talk about Illinois tax sales have been probably one of our most popular investments among our clients for the last 10 years. And it is that compounding effect that really engages them and that they find very appealing. I have this big caution, not this year, because the tax sales this year have, well, in the past 2 years, they've gone uh, a little cuckoo. Um, Maximum bid rates are 18%, and again, that's for every 6 months. It's a bid down state, so that means that the opening bid is going to be 18%. And what you do is you go in there and you say 18, 10, 5, 2, 1, 0. It's not 18 like a Meekums auction where it's 18 and then it's 17.5 and then it's 16.75. No, it goes very, very quickly. So it's 18, 10, 5, 2, 1, 0. This year, it's going 0, 0, 0, 0. And we have our theories behind why that's happening. But essentially what it's done is it's made the competition in Illinois this year very, very difficult. So as an individual investor not using a servicing agent like PIP, if you're going to Illinois tax sales, you're probably not going to be very successful. We're actually covering 97 sales within 4 months. So regardless of this seriously competitive, outlandish bidding that's going on right now, we're still actually doing pretty well this year. We're having to be a little more conservative. We're having to go to more auctions than we normally have to go to, but we're still getting the rates that our investors are used to. And I would like to acknowledge at this point, thank you for joining us, since half of you on this call are actually investors and are placing in Illinois right now. So back to Illinois, I've already described it. Penalty state means you earn the full interest rate if it's redeemed. So obviously to make the return, that certificate has to be redeemed and paid off. That bid rate increases every 6 months. And again, I like to always give reference to where we get our information or where we convey our information. So the tax codes are always going to be in our presentations if you want to go read up on it and learn about it yourself. We're not going to pitch any pie in the sky ideas that just become unrealistic. So here we have just an illustration of how that compounding effect works. If you look at the top one, the date it was sold was October 29th, 2012. Actually, they both were bought and sold at the same time. And you can see on the top one, it's about, it looks like it's a 16% bid rate. So not quite that 18% compounding effect, but still a pretty good return. The amount of the purchase was $14.38, that's your principal. And then the interest, or as we like to call it, the penalty, was $8.63. So you can see that compounding effect took place and essentially went through 5 phases before it was redeemed. On the bottom one, you can see where it actually went through the whole process. Your initial investment was $1122.21. It redeemed with penalty and interest of $1211.99, which is actually 108% return on the original principal. So you can see how the compounding effect of Illinois becomes very, very attractive very, very quickly. Okay, so what about first mortgages and other liens? That's obviously the number one question that always comes up. If you're going to go to a tax deed, if you're going to take the title, what about the IRS or a bank, somebody else having an interest in the property? Well, tax liens in, I'll say 95% of the states are super liens. As a super lien, it is categorized as being higher and having more priority than any other type of lien, subject to certain other super liens. So a tax lien or a tax deed is going to be superior to a first mortgage. A first mortgage has the right to redeem the tax lien just like the homeowner has to redeem the tax lien. And usually what happens is when the mortgage company finds out that the taxes haven't been paid, they run and initiate a foreclosure proceeding on the homeowner, pay the taxes, evict the homeowner, and deal with it on their own. That's what happens a lot of the times. A lot of times they don't even catch it. But other examples of super liens would be IRS liens. And I would like to talk about IRS liens for just a minute because there's a lot of again, gurus, we'll call them, will use IRS liens as sort of you've got to know what you're doing. You got to follow our processes. You got to follow our procedures. Yes, IRS liens can be big and scary. The IRS can be big and scary. However, IRS tax liens are pretty simple to clear off the title. The IRS is not interested in the collateral. They're interested in the person. In all the years we've been doing this, we run across IRS liens quite a bit. And when that situation comes up, we have to inform them that we're pursuing foreclosure. They have a right to step in and essentially redeem, just like a homeowner or mortgage company could redeem. And 99% of the time they don't. I'll say 100%. I've actually never had an IRS lien go through where they took a superior role in the investment over the tax buyer. So property tax liens are a super lien. Other types of super liens are going to be code enforcement or municipal liens. Basically what that means, I mentioned in that one slide, you get a tax deed, but it's not free and clear. Because code enforcement or municipal liens could be on there, and they're likely going to be on there. If the taxes haven't been paid, the yard probably isn't being kept up, and the city's going to go out there and cut the grass. It's only going to be $100, $200, but it's still going to be a lien on the property, and that's something that you're going to have to address once you take the deed to the property. And the other one is condo or HOA liens, POA liens. They also have a right. But essentially it goes in this order as to who has the right first. All right, so what is a tax deed? Tax deed is essentially the instrument that is used to convey the title to the tax buyer. In a lot of states, they actually go through the whole lien process themselves and then sell a tax deed at auction. In other states like Georgia, which is one of my favorites, it's what we consider a hybrid. As a hybrid, basically what happens is they sell you a deed at the tax sale, but it acts like a lien. You get this deed that looks just like the one here in front of you, but it has a redemption period of 1 year. It has to pay 20% penalty either a day after it was purchased or 364 days after it was purchased. Then you have the right to foreclose the right of redemption. So Georgia is what we call a hybrid state, but you can purchase tax deeds in a lot of other states. Florida actually holds two different kinds of sales. They have a tax lien sale where you go and buy the liens, and then they have another process, which is the tax deed sale. The tax buyer that actually bought the tax lien, once the redemption period expires, they do what's called a tax deed application. The county does another set of research and title work, and then they actually auction off that tax deed again at another sale. So the tax lien buyer has to be the highest bidder on their own lien. It's kind of a wacky system down there. So tax deeds 101. In some states, it's very simple to get the tax deed conveyed to the buyer. Georgia is one of those where it's pretty simple. South Carolina, it's very simple. In other states, it can be lengthy to obtain the title. Illinois is a great state as far as the penalties are concerned, but going into foreclosure, it's It's fine, but it's technical and it can be a lengthy process. Again, we make everything passive on behalf of the investors, but because everything is placed in your name and not pooled, the investor has to make all the decisions on every single lien moving forward. So we try to make it as simple as possible, but there are some technical aspects to the investment that will require your engagement at some point. In some states, the tax deed could be as marketable or as insurable as a warranty deed. States that would fall into that category, I would say Indiana, Kentucky, Ohio. They are clean, clear titles to the property in most circumstances when after you acquire them from the tax commissioner's sale. In other states, the process is going to have some red tape involved. Georgia is still a very simple state, but we still have to foreclose the right to redeem. That means we have to inform anyone who has an interest in the property. That takes time. We have to get the sheriff out to post notices that we are foreclosing. That takes time. So there are other states that might have this process. In this business now, we have a lot of companies that are what we call title certification companies. They are essentially companies that make that process go a lot faster. And essentially, they will insure the title to the property without having to cut through all that red tape. All right, so now we're going to start talking about REO. And I apologize, I'm starting to lose my voice here. I'm recovering from some bronchitis, and it seems not quite there yet. REO 101. To be proficient in tax default investments such as tax liens, you also need to be proficient in REO. Tax liens, eventually, a lot of them are going to become REO. REO, what is REO? REO is real estate owned. It used to be a term that was primarily used with bank-owned real estate, but really all it is the investor owns. So you have to be proficient on your offload of your REO long before you even invest in those tax liens. Tax liens and tax deeds obviously have the potential to evolve into REO. Depending on the state, it could be as little as 1%. It could be as much as 60%. A state like Georgia or Texas, which has very aggressive tax buyer-friendly laws, odds are you're going to foreclose on at least 60% of what you purchase in the tax sales. By classification, tax liens are an alternative investment, and tax buyers should not bring traditional means of acquisition, management, or resale of the newly acquired REO into their strategy. What we see a lot of the times, and it could be with hedge funds or very savvy investors in the tax lien business, is that they are very good at buying the tax liens, but once it evolves into REO, they want to bring the very traditional standards to the process, i.e., all right, I own this property, it's occupied, I need to evict that person. Okay, now I own it, I need to list it with a real estate agent. There's a lot more ways to maximize your profits than eviction. And in fact, we think those are the last methods that should be considered, because once you evict somebody, you make them angry, they tear up the property, you make it exposed to vandals and thieves. We always say when we find a vacant tax sale property, if it has the copper in it or it has the air conditioner compressor, that we've essentially struck gold. Because most of the times that's not going to be the case. Beautiful thing is that you acquired it for half dollars on the dollar, so you've got a lot of room to make decisions as to what your next move is going to be, and that's what we help you do. So what I'm essentially alluding to is there's more than one way to skin a cat. If you purchased an alternative investment, why would you try to sell it by traditional means? You essentially cut the bridge when you come in with that mentality. There are auctions that we can go sell it for. Move it quickly, turn it quickly, go do it again. We can do contracts for deed that we're going to look at in a minute. You can rent it. You can sell it to the occupant, which essentially becomes another contract for deed, but you send some notices to the occupant and they say, hey, whoa, wait a minute, I've been paying my landlord for 3 years. who am I supposed to be paying? They want to stay in the property. You can fix and flip it, or you can do an as-is resale, because again, you're acquiring it for $half on the dollar, and at the end of the day, it's just about how quickly you can turn a profit, liquidate, and move on and do it again. So we're going to look at this specific example in a couple of slides. This is a contract for deed, and what I love about them is they're short, non-recourse terms. They're high but non-predatory amortized rates. That is, we're not doing hard money lending is not predatory, but we're not charging those type of interest rates to who we are selling the properties to. And most importantly, there's no landlord hassles. A lot of people get turned off about being a tax deed investor or a property investor because they don't want to be a long distance landlord, or they're only used to investing in their backyard. And that mentality is something we're really focused on getting people over. It doesn't matter. As long as the returns are there and the services are there, you shouldn't be concerned of the type of investment that you're going into. We are essentially the landlord for you. But with contracts for deed, you don't have to deal with repairs. You don't have to deal with maintenance and taxes and HOA fees and vacancy and evictions. It's a contract for deed. They're in charge of all of it. We do encourage that the taxes be built into their payments and that they are paid through us or by our investor and tacked on to whatever their payment is, just so you have control of how that's happening. However, if you choose not to do that, if they default on the taxes again, you're essentially just doing an eviction. You're starting all over again. You're resetting the numbers. It's still your property. So here we have a total investment of $21,750. It was sold to the occupant for $45,000. This property is in Illinois. So Illinois essentially has a 3-year right of redemption, and then you go through the foreclosure process. And I mentioned that it can be a bit of, not a hassle, but it can be a little time consuming. So it's going to take some time. So we have a 5-year term once we actually acquired the title at $44,079 at a 6% amortized rate. So that gives you a total profit of $22,329 or 102.6% over the total investment. Now, I'm going to lose some people as we move on to the next slide, but I just want to point out that that is 102.6% over the total investment, and it probably took 4 years to get there. So what are we talking about? We're talking about 25% per year. Sounds great, doesn't sound as great as the 36% on redeemed liens. And now we have the but. Okay, so the initial investment, numbers are still the same here. The initial investment was only $2,404.95 in 2010. So that investment is essentially what the lien was bought for. It could have been bought for 18%. I don't know. But that was the investment. The additional investment was $18,750. So now we're talking about cost to carry. All that was tied up until the actual deed acquisition was made was about $5,000. So we're talking $2,404 plus attorney's fees, plus once the deed was paid, additional taxes, which is how we drove it up to $21,750 relatively quickly. But that was done in the last year of the investment. So if you were to, we like to use actual numbers, not annualized. So if you were actually to annualize the cost value of money, it would actually be a lot better than 102.6% if you broke it down annualized over that course of 5 years. Client has already recovered 45% of their initial investment on this investment. So everything else is more or less just gravy at this point. So this is an Illinois investment taken through the entire process. And you know, at face value, you look at it and you say 25%, that's still pretty darn good. But again, annualized, because that $18,000 wasn't actually even tied into the investment until the last year, the last 6 months before it was resold under contract for deed, isn't taken into equation into those numbers. Then we have fix and flip. This is actually a Georgia property. This one was purchased not at a tax sale, but at a bank foreclosure sale. Beautiful thing about Georgia is tax sales are on the first Tuesday of every month. Other beautiful thing about Georgia is all the bank foreclosure sales are also the first Tuesday of every month. So we are essentially in each county attending as many as 5 sales at a time. We're attending tax sales and we're attending bank foreclosure sales. And all we're there to do is get the best opportunity possible, whether it's a tax deed through the tax sale or it's a bank foreclosure, and then we immediately go off and start doing repairs and rehab and whatnot. This one happened to be one from early fall that we turned around relatively quickly. And this is the sort of thing we're doing in Georgia right now. They're not all as high as this particular one, but we're still doing pretty darn good on the averages. But this is a fix and flip in Georgia. This could have worked, honestly, in any of the investment areas that we work in. All right, then you're going to have the as-is resale. There's always going to be clients out there that are just not going to wrap their heads around the idea of not being a long-distance landlord. They're going to be willing to go after the deed and then just say, hey, you know what, Charles, dump it. I don't care. Just get rid of it. I don't want it. This one, this slide's probably about 4 months old now. So it's probably already been moved. But this is essentially as is. We get the deed, occupied or not. We just move it. It's worth more than you've got invested by a long shot, and we just essentially just flip it on behalf of the investor as is. So the BPO when we did this one was $25,550. The anticipated cash flow through that BPO, had the homeowner wanted to rent it, would have been $450 a month. That's an annualized return of 30.2% gross. If it flipped, which it has at this point, flipped as is, compared to the total investment would be 42.9% as a gross. So this we are essentially cycling these types of as-is resales through the system every day, as Rich can tell you a little later on. All right, so this is another Illinois property, and this is a rented, and the ROI looks huge, obviously. However, you know, again, I want to point out for the first 4 years of the investments, roughly, the investor into this particular property didn't have a lot tied up. The principal investment was $872. Back taxes were pretty high, but all of that didn't play a role until he was actually about to take the deed. But if we look at this at face value, for the first 4 years, he made about 11.5% on his investment. After those 4 years, he's now making 45.3% on his investment as a rented REO that was purchased through an Illinois tax sale. It took him a little while to get there, but once he got there, he's making a phenomenal return. All right, so this comparison is essentially just a comparison between a Georgia bank foreclosure acquisition and a Georgia tax deed acquisition. And you can very quickly, just looking at the duration of investment, you can see the differences between the two. You can identify which one was obviously a bank foreclosure and which one was a tax deed foreclosure. The numbers, when I talk about Georgia, I always say, don't be concerned whether we acquire a bank foreclosure for you or we acquire a tax deed foreclosure, because at the end of the day, the numbers, the profitability, it's essentially going to become a wash. It's 27% in 9 months for a bank foreclosure. It's 40% for a tax deed foreclosure. But when you take into consideration the time value of money, or the time value of the investment, you can really annualize that down, break that down, and everything that we invest in a state like Georgia is going to fall in the 24 to 28% range. The cash on cash profit might look a lot better than that, as it does in this bottom one, but again, it's taking a little longer time. So that's something to consider if you're thinking about investing in a state like Georgia, is that bank foreclosure, tax deed foreclosure doesn't really matter as long as we're hitting the numbers that we convey and that the clients are expecting. Everybody should be happy. All right, so for sake of time, I've had to cut a few slides out, but PIP works on behalf of individual investors, such as yourselves. Those that are wanting to break into this industry, have caught those late night infomercials from the gurus, realize that there's probably some truth behind the hype, but just don't know where to get started. That's what PIP is here to help you with. We handle the investments on your behalf. We take care of everything through all the processes. Through another company of ours, which is Vision Tax Lien Services, we work on behalf of hedge funds or institutional investors that are also on the same playing field. Institutional investors are very different from individual investors. That is, they have very strict, very set margins, and they're in the business of buying tax liens, not owing REO, just like banks are in the business of signing on mortgages or loaning on homes, but also are not in the business of owning REO. Absolutely very, very similar circumstances. So what happens when a hedge fund has too much REO? They can't invest in more tax liens. Just like when we had the financial crisis a number of years ago, banks had too much REO. They needed to offload their foreclosure, so they had cash flow. Hedge funds work the exact same way. So it presents a huge opportunity for individual tax buyers like yourselves. They have to move the properties. So they need a quick and easy way to offload those properties, and you are the solution to their essential problem. Vision Tax Lien Services is the institutional company. Offers investors a means to liquidate REO quickly, while also providing individual investors like yourselves a chance to pick up tax foreclosure properties for $half on the dollar. You can skip all the headaches of going through the tax sale processes and essentially just acquire these right off their books. And Vision has about 2,000 properties that are constantly changing, rolling through the portfolio, that are being bought and sold every day. We're probably doing, 10, 15 properties a day on a good day. Whether it's from other tax buyers or just people locally that are interested in the properties, this is a great way to acquire real estate for $half on the dollar. So the Vision properties, let me let that load. Vision properties are going to be, again, in the tax buyer friendly states. There's a lot of states that, for a lot of reasons, institutional buyers as well as individual buyers that we work with stay away from. We focus on the tax buyer friendly states. So the states available are going to be like Florida, Kentucky, Alabama, South Carolina, Illinois, Ohio, and Indiana, where you can essentially go pick through the list, say, hey, that looks like a pretty good cash flow property. I would like to put an offer in on that property. So there's no competition. You just go make an offer, get it approved, and you own the real estate. You do with it as you please. The property types are going to be everything. As tax buyers, we buy everything if we think it has potential. It's going to be single family vacant, occupied. It's going to be cash flowing already. It could be vacant land. It's going to be commercial, condos, lakefront, just about anything you can possibly think of. Deed types is something that I touched on briefly early, that may fly over a lot of people's heads. Tax deeds are what is conveyed, but that type of deed can be converted into an insurable warranty deed. So the deed types are going to be tax title. A lot of them are already going to be converted to warranty deeds. A lot of them are going to be in the middle of quiet title action being started. Title certification could be available. That is, you don't have to go through the headaches of all the quiet title actions before you actually take title to the property. And then some are actually going to already have the certification completed. The hedge funds and the institutional buyers that are investing, they're already taking initiative to make those properties able to liquidate or market as quickly as they possibly can to move them off their books. So they'll invest a little bit more to make them move a little bit faster. So what is quiet title action and title certification? Quiet title action is a legal process that essentially clears the red tape. Because tax liens are a superior lien, if there's a mortgage involved, we may have to go through a quiet title action. And that essentially is just going through a judicial foreclosure process that goes to the court and says, hey, they had a chance to redeem the property just like the homeowner did. They chose not to. Move that mortgage out of the way. That's a quiet title action. Title certification is very similar, except there's no judicial process involved. All it is basically a title certification says, did all the processes of the tax sale happen according to the law? Did the county properly notify the homeowner? Did the tax buyer properly file whatever legal paperwork he needed to file? If all those pieces are in place, they'll go ahead and certify the title without the quiet title action and insure it so you can sell it just like as if you did a quiet title action. All right, so in closing, PIP Group has been investing on behalf of investors for over 14 years. We have nearly 700 investors worldwide. Approximately 40% of our clients work with a Self Direct IRA custodian. So that's why we're here. That's why we're on this call. There are a lot of custodians popping up out there. We want to work with the best. So we try to associate ourselves with the best. You can invest in tax liens and tax default real estate with PIP through Self Direct IRA or not. We handle everything for you. It is 100% passive as far as our clients are concerned. The investments are placed in your name, so you have 100% control, which is why when we get to stages like foreclosure or anything else, you have to be involved. We have to educate you and continuously educate you on how the investment is proceeding, what's going to happen next, and what our experience suggests you should do moving forward. You can also invest in tax default real estate yourself without ever contacting PIP through Vision Tax Lien Services. You can get a list of their properties from our website without any membership fee or anything else. Don't use the www, but it is reo.pipgroup.com. And you will be able to access all the properties that Vision has rolling through its system. And again, it's going to change daily. VTLS, Vision Tax Lien Service, has a continuous rotation of tax foreclosures consisting of about 2,000 properties. And again, these are going to be everything from postage stamp lots to nice large commercial office buildings. It's going to be anything that falls into a tax sale. The standards of institutional investors is different than what PIP does. So the properties that are going to be out there may not be to the caliber of what PIP is used to providing its investors, but it still has great opportunity for specialized investors as well as just generalized investors like yourself. So with that, I will wrap up. I'm going to pass the computer over to Stefan, and he is going to fill you in on all the great benefits of working with Provident Group.
Hi, everybody. I'm Stefan Hild. I'm with Provident Trust Group, Self-Directed IRA custodian. Can everybody see my screen?
I can.
Okay, great.
There it is.
Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go briefly into who we are, what we do, and some of the differences between us and other self-directed IRA custodians out there. My slides are moving a little slow here too, so bear with me a quick second. So the idea behind a self-directed IRA is take control of your money. You get to decide what you want to invest into, get a more steady, predictable return on your money, investing in alternative investments such as tax liens. So we all know what the financial advisors out there say, slow and steady wins the race. Tell you the truth, there's nothing slow and steady about the stock market. It's up 1 minute, down the next minute. You might be up 11% one quarter, down 10% the next quarter. With an alternative investment, at least you know what the return on your investment is going to be. So a little history about Provident Trust Group. Actually, our numbers have grown since this was made. We actually have around 25,000 clients right now, closer to about $4 billion in assets underneath us. Provident actually offers all kinds of different services and products. We do offer different products that other self-directed IRA custodians do not offer out there. So along with your basic IRA accounts, such as the traditional, the Roth accounts, we do offer small business retirement accounts, such as your SEP, your Simple, your solo 401ks, and we can even do full-on 401k plans. We actually have a couple of the major casinos down here in Las Vegas with 1,500 plus employees. The nice thing about our 401k plans with employees is we can actually relieve all the fiduciary liability from the employer. So if they were to get sued by their employees, they actually carry no liability at all. We actually carry all the liability in regards to that. So Provident Trust Group was actually founded in 2008. We have 3 different owners, Teresa Fetty, who is our CEO, Jason Helmquist, and Nate Wheatley. Teresa Fetty, our CEO, she's actually Fortune Magazine's #1 female entrepreneur of the year. She's Incorporated Magazine's top 40 under 40, actually ahead of Oprah Winfrey. They actually grew the company from $300 million in assets to over $3 billion, well, $4 billion now. Okay, my slide just wanted to come up there. I'll go on to the next. A little more history about our accreditations here about Provident Trust Group. 2015, we were actually named the #1 custodian of the year by Trust Advisor. We're actually named the 11th most advisor-friendly trust company by Trust Advisor. 2011, 2012, 2013, and 2014. We are actually top 500 out of the 5,000 list of the nation's fastest growing private companies. All of our employees over here, we are CISP certified. We are certified IRA specialists by the banking industry. It takes about 2 years to get your license in regards to that. A lot of the other custodians out there, they do not have any licensing. The main thing that you want to look for when you're trying to choose a custodian is, are they a third-party administrator or are they an actual custodian? If they don't have the word trust or bank at the end of the name, chances are they're only a third-party administrator. That means they couldn't get their banking license. So what they would do is they would be in control of your account, then they would turn the account over to a custodian such as ours to actually hold the actual funds, because we are banking regulated. IRS comes in here every year in the month of June. For 2 weeks, they sit in our boardroom and audit every single account that we have. I'm sure everybody out there is familiar with the Bernie Madoff story. If you're with a third-party administrator, that's exactly what can happen to you. So I guess right now, what I can do is I just wanted to go into the history about Provident, what we offer, some of the differences. I know a few of you out there are with different custodians right now. The way that we differ, #1, we're a flat fee. We don't have any fees based upon the account balance. We're not going to charge you if you have multiple tax liens inside of your account. We're not going to charge you per asset or anything. We don't have a billing date of the first of the year for anybody, so even if you opened your account in October and then come the first of the year, you're going to be billed again for your account. We don't do that. We have anniversary date billing, so from the time that you opened your account, that's the time that you'll be billed again in the next year. As you can see, we are ranked #1 in the country right now in terms of service and in terms of growth as well. So I guess I can turn it back over to you, Charles, Rich, or we can turn it over to anybody on the webinar if they have any questions. We can go ahead and answer the questions.
Yeah, let's go ahead. Let's go ahead and answer the questions. I've got one for you real quick, Stefan, and that is going to be if somebody were to transfer out of another custodian over to you, what would be, I guess, the incoming costs or transfer fees to do that?
That depends. So it's only a matter of a few $100s. Like I said, we don't do anything based upon the account balance. I think to move your guys' fees over, we're actually going to knock our first-year fees in half. So under normal circumstances, it would be $395 a year with a $50 activation fee, and we're just going to cut it in half for you.
Okay, great.
Move your clients over.
Okay, great.
How long it would take to actually move the money over? That all depends on the current custodian and what type of an account that they have.
Right, you're right. Like you said, if it's a third party, it's going to take a little longer.
Correct. So if they're with Equity Trust, you know, their turnaround time, you're looking at probably 2 or 3 weeks.
Right. Okay.
To transfer.
Okay. Yeah. No, I'll ask. We've kind of had Rich on standby to field the questions, so we'll see what he's got out there.
Thanks, guys. I really don't see. I'm not sure if I'm looking at the wrong thing, but I only see the staff list. I'm not seeing any questions just yet, but I did have some questions that came up as I was watching the presentation, Charles. How often are tax lien auctions held in Illinois? I know you said Georgia's every Tuesday of every month, but how often is Illinois held?
Illinois is we call it a season. So Illinois investments start in early October, and the lion's share of them will go through we'll call it mid-December. We do have a lot of little ones that kind of straggle out through February, March. But if you're going to invest in Illinois, you should really be targeting the fall months of October, November.
Got it. I see the questions here now. Here's another one. How long is the foreclosure process once the redemption period expires in Illinois?
Once the period expires in Illinois, it can take up to 18 months. That sounds extreme, and that is extreme, but that is definitely on the long side. On the average side, we like to tell our investors to expect a year. And that is because of the noticing or the prove-up processes in Illinois. We have to engage in certain steps, i.e. Legal publications that run for 90 days. The sheriff has to hand deliver a notice to somebody on the property. Actually, that law just changed in this week. But anyhow, there's a lot of things that are required before we can actually go to the judge and say, all right, we've done everything. Let's get the deed.
Excellent. Thank you. One more here. I see. Here's an interesting one here about the EPA. You said you buy everything. Do you ever buy industrial or commercial properties? And if so, what about EPA issues? Is an EPA lien a super lien?
An EPA lien is a super lien, and it should be added to that super lien category. EPA liens usually aren't liens as they much are more or less, the big bully in the room that's waiting for you to take the deed. We do run across those, and there have actually been times that we've been caught by those. It's pretty rare, but if we're talking specifically about Illinois, the beautiful thing about Illinois is they have a ton of provisions that allow you to get out of an investment when something like that comes up. An EPA lien may not come up in our initial due diligence, but it comes in after our foreclosure due diligence is started. And what we'll do in that situation is we'll call for a sale in error, or we'll call for cause for sale in error. What that essentially enables us to do is to get all the principal out of the lien and not foreclose on the property.
Sort of like a get out of jail free card kind of thing.
Right, exactly.
Stefan, here's one for you, sir. What kind of restrictions are there for foreign investors regarding American IRA investments? And a follow-up, can I establish an IRA through an American LLC?
So, yes and no. I am a little confused by the question. So yes, you can set up an LLC and we can set up a small business retirement account. You can actually use your self-directed IRA or 401k or solo K. You can invest anywhere in the world with it, actually. So even if it's in Costa Rica, Australia, or whatever. We are also unique, as in we are the only self-directed IRA custodians that are international. So we actually have offices in Australia. They have self-directed IRA. They have self-directed IRA accounts called self-managed super funds. So we could actually set up a self-directed account over there, and you could use your Australian retirement account to invest over here in tax liens. So there are a lot of different things that you can do. And actually with our company, we do allow the checkbook control if that is maybe the direction that you were going with that. So if you wanted to set up a self-directed IRA account, we can then set up an LLC. IRA owns 100% of that LLC. You would be the managing member. We would do one direction of investment that would move the money from the IRA account to the LLC bank account. Now you can just go ahead and write a check for whatever investment that you like. And when the money comes back, whether it's rental income, dividends, or whatever, it goes into the LLC. At that point, you have the option to either A, reinvest it again just by writing a check, B, just keep it in the LLC, or C, you can put it back in the IRA. So it does give you a lot more freedom, control. If you're going to be investing into tax liens, I would probably recommend going to checkbook control. That way you can do things on the spot in regards to writing a check. So,
very good. Excellent. That's all the questions I see right now. Thank you, gentlemen. I'm not sure if there are any other questions, but
I've got a couple here, so I will cover those real quick. We have minimum investments and desirable amounts. It's going to be investment specific. That is what state you're investing into. When it comes to buying REO assets off the Vision platform, there is no minimum. There's going to be stuff out there for $500. There's going to be stuff out there for $500,000.
I can actually vouch for that. I never thought in my life I would be as a salesman. Could I say that I can sell you swampland for $1?
Right, and you're literally doing that now, yeah.
I can actually do that now.
Right, yeah. So desirable amounts are going to be state specific if you're investing with PIP. And then a follow-up question to that was expected returns. Obviously, it's a case-by-case basis, and we don't want to convey, averages when we're talking about IRA clients. I will say that in 14 years, our purchase rate average on behalf of our investors has never been less than 24%. That is when we acquire a tax lien in, say, Illinois. The average rate, the weighted average rate of their investment is going to be 24% or greater. However, that is based on that lien being redeemed, and therein lies the one answer we can never provide is when is that lien going to be redeemed? How can you annualize that number? Because it's going to work differently for every single investor. But it is our purchase rate average has never been less than 24%. And I've got one from a client, so I've got to answer it. Are states becoming more internet-based? So at some point that it will make it difficult for your company to still be in business. That's a great question, and the answer is yes and no. Florida was at one point a great state for individual investors. It all went online, and it became a great state for institutional investors. So in that respect, the competition didn't necessarily grow. It became different. Uh, Instead of investors going into Manatee County and being able to acquire, a 5% penalty and a 15% bid rate that's prorated throughout the year. Well, hedge funds stepped in, and they're buying everything for 1/4 of 1% because all they're interested is that 5% penalty. At the bottom of the barrel, they get 5% on anything that redeems. However, they are only interested in that margin. So if a state then converts to a institutional buy, if you will, or an internet-based state, then how that translates to individual investors like yourself is that it becomes a property type investment state for us rather than a redemption type state for us. Not a lot are really going online. Illinois is never going to go online. Cook County is, but quite honestly, it's like I make the comparison of, there's California and then there's the rest of the country. It kind of works that way in Illinois. There's Cook and there's the rest of the state. They have a very good computerized system that works very well, keeps everything very competitive, and most states are like that. Florida was the pioneer of going online, and it's working for them because the rates are bottom of the barrel. But the problem is when you had 100 tax buyers showing up at a sale, now you have literally 50,000, and it's a matter of just picking the poke, so if you will. And that's all I've got. One last question. Yes, we are recording this. It will be available to anyone that requests it through Provident or through PIP or myself. It will also eventually make it onto our website and will be available on our website for at least the next year. So anyone that has come in a little late, you can access the webinar in its recorded format probably within the next 48 hours. With that, we're about 5 minutes over, so I will wrap it up, say thank you to Stefan, thank you to Rich, and look forward to doing the next one.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.
Good night, everybody.
All right.